Hello, everybody. How you doing today? Hope you have a nice day where you are, and hope you can handle it just fine. Here in the northern hemisphere, we got spring going on, and of course the flowers are budding, and yeah, the allergies are going crazy. But other than that, not much we can do about it. Just do the best that we can. All right, our lesson today is talking about lasting relationships. You know, we go through life we see it, everybody has a relationship of some kind with someone or something. And it might be a relationship with their pet, it might be a relationship with another person, it might be their relationship with a business. But there's relationships everywhere we go. And anytime we deal with anybody, even if it's at the checkout counter, there is a temporary relationship that we are going through. And so we want to talk about making these relationships last. You know, we go through life, we find that some relationships last and some fail. And the reason that so many relationships fail is for the reason that's the oldest of all, sin. I mean, you can try and break down the reasons and causes, you can list them all out, but they're all motivated by sin. Sin and selfishness. Selfishness is sin. And that's what it comes down to. When relationships fail, it's because one or both parties in the relationship has sinned in some way, whether it's sin against God or whether it's sin against the other person. I mean, some sin is always involved anytime you break down a relationship and see one that has failed. See, one of the most important factors in keeping a relationship going is having something in common. And that's what Paul wrote in Philippians 2:2 when he said, "Make my joy complete by being of the same mind, maintaining the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose." See, there's many types of relationships that we go through during life. And some are more involved than others, and some require a greater effort to keep that relationship lasting. So, let's look at a few of these relationships. There's the family relationship. Yeah, you really don't have much choice in this matter, except husband and wife make that choice. But the kids have no choice to be a part of this family. But anyway, this relationship of the family, stands as a foundation for all other relationships. See, the entire structure of most nations is based upon the family unit. And when people have written about the fall of Roman Empire, the fall of other nations, it practically always was based upon the fact that the first thing that went was the family structure. Once that was gone, there was nothing to support and give anybody any cohesiveness at all. And so the family that sticks together, I mean, during adversity, I mean, that they become stronger. And of course, the support from each other member of the family makes this a very strong relationship. Now, sadly, in our society, some do not revere or respect the family relationship. In fact, we have many elements in society just trying to destroy the relationship that God established with the man, the woman, and as parents, and then the children. So what happens, people don't follow God's ways, they do their own thing. We have many homes where one of the parents is missing. I mean, and there's a lot of kids, but the parents aren't, not all the parents are there. And so what usually happens to these people is they learn to rely upon themselves, they become loners. And the problem is they don't really fit into society, so they're going to find someone who is a lot like them. And then guess what? Okay, now they're going to become a gang member, they're going to be a loner, they're going to become an outcast, or many of them just become criminals. I mean, society tells us that if we had more homes where there was a mother and father in the home to direct the child, the prisons would not be as full as they are. We wouldn't have to keep building prisons. And so that's a result of becoming the outcast and criminals. And as we have this family relationship, there's much to be learned from the other members of the family. I mean, now children are supposed to learn from their parents. Parents have the instruction to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, Ephesians 6:4. And so, yeah, we should be considering that. But we learn. I mean, parents should be teaching their children how to grow up, how to become responsible, how to become mature, and prepare them for life when they leave the family, or at least until they begin their own families. So that's what should take place. Another relationship is when we're in business. I mean, employers and employees need to agree upon standards and keep themselves accountable for their actions. See, those who apply themselves with the common goal of the business become good employees. And these are the type of people an employer wants to work with and even help. And those who are in the business only for the money are not valuable to the business at all. They're detrimental. And some cases, they will not survive very long. So once again, we see a common factor is necessary to keep a good relationship. In our communities, we find that we still have relationships, but these are weaker than the other relationships. Yeah, we have acquaintances and we have friends. We say hi to this person, that person. We may even stop and chit chat for a little while. But we don't really have these strong of relationships. And so while we are in a local area, the goals of each person in that area are generally, they're pretty much general at most. Sure, we would appreciate if all in the community would look out for their neighbors. That would be nice. And it is helpful if you get everyone to share the common goals of the community. Sadly, nowadays, the only time that happens if there's a natural disaster or emergency of some sort. And so you want the neighborhood to look nice, yeah, and some work to keep it clean. And we should express our appreciation, maybe even help them keep it clean. See, you want a safe neighborhood, so you work alongside the police and authorities and maybe some of your neighbor community watch groups or something like that. And we just want to make sure that things are safe for everybody in the community. And so we work together for the common good of everyone in that community. All right, spiritually, we have a few relationships we must consider. Now, foremost is our relationship to God. And we must recognize that this relationship is maintained and kept intact not by compromising, but by agreeing to a set of standards given to us by God. See, Malachi 3:6 tells that God does not change. And really, God does not compromise. We might have a few cases where a little negotiation was taking place, like when Abraham was negotiating for the safety of those in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And it started out, if you find 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, down to 10. And God said even with 10, he would spare the city. But he couldn't even find that. And so we have to recognize we need to follow the standards that God gave us. And so God does not make a deal with anyone other than on his terms. And here's what a lot of people need to learn. A lot of people have come up with their own standards and substituted them for what God's standards are, and they think that's going to be good enough to get them to heaven. And sadly, it's not. All right, so this relationship is based upon the submission to God, but is also supported by a trust in God. And why do we trust God? It is because God has made promises that we learn to trust him. And let's face it, God has a very good record of keeping his promises. And such promises are recorded in the pages of the Bible, which we're able to learn from. And most of us can read. So, yeah, we read from the pages of his Bible and we learn what God wants us to do. In fact, he's given us everything we need concerning our salvation. 2 Peter 1:3 tells us that. And so we don't have to be guessing at any time. All we have to do is go to the pages of the Bible and see what God expects of us. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out, and really, it can be done. See, we also have a relationship with others who share our common faith. See, our agreement to work together as a congregation, as a local group of Christians, is based upon criteria of obedience and subjection to the will of God. I mean, Jesus is the head. That's what Paul talked about when he talked about the body in 1 Corinthians 12. We have many members, but there is only one head, and that head is Jesus Christ. As long as Christ is the head and everybody submits to the will of God and Christ, then things are going to be good. It's when people stop following the will of Christ and God that we have problems. All right, so those who do not choose to obey God should not, cannot, and will not be involved in this fellowship. It should not be allowed. And some people kind of compromise. Well, that's their opinion. We'll fellowship them anyway. You know what? You have a problem with God when you start doing that. See, this relationship is established upon each member's involvement with their relationship with God. And we're taught that if anyone walks disorderly or against the laws of God, or they teach error, they cannot be a part of God's relationship. No. 2 John 9 through 11 tells us this. I mean, anyone who doesn't do this does not have God and the doctrine of Christ. And if they're that way, don't give them a greeting. Don't help them out in any way, because we can be caught participating in their evil deeds. And so we see this, and the Bible tells us and warns us to cease any relationship with anyone who is not approved by God. We know who's approved of God by their obedience. He that fears God and works of righteousness is approved of God. That's what Peter told Cornelius. So we must be careful to build and keep a relationship with God. But we must be diligent to avoid a relationship with the world. And sometimes in our churches and our congregations, some people are not willing to give up the world. So we have to battle against that, and we have to teach against that. And because of that, some people's feelings get hurt, and there might be a little bit of friction. But if we are mindful about going to heaven and showing love to each other, those should be very rare. See, we must remember the entirety of God's law is based upon the first and second greatest commands. We read that in Matthew 22, 27 through 40. And basically what Jesus said, the greatest command, love God. Second greatest command, love your fellow man. And then it says upon these two rests the whole law. And so we see this. Love is the foundation of all of God's law. That was repeated by Paul. And so how we treat others is going to be a heavy factor in our final judgment. So we talk about relationships. You know, Matthew 25, 31 through 46. I mean, when Jesus was talking to these people, he didn't bring up, okay, what doctrine did you practice or anything like that. How did you treat your fellow man is going to be one of the bases of our criteria for either going to heaven or not going to heaven. So work on that. Think about that. Lasting relationships. And let me put a plug in. I wrote a book several years ago called The Second Greatest Command. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble and other places. I'll put a link to it here. And basically, it's building, maintaining, and keeping good relationships. And we must learn how to do that. And so if you get a chance, maybe check out that book. And yeah, it's self-published, so there's a few typos in it. I'll warn you that, but nothing that's going to really harm or present any error. So that's my plug for the day. In fact, I think that's the first time I plugged that book. But anyway, you have a good day. Lord willing, we'll be back again tomorrow with another lesson. And do something for God today. All right, bye-bye for now.